Good evening, St. Louis. And, well, we weren't going to be able to celebrate wins every single time here in the City Hub postgame presented by Hot Shots, and it finally broke after 4 games. City falls 1-0 to the Philadelphia Union and former manager Bradley Carnell. Again, this is the City Hub postgame. You're listening to Sports Hub STL, presented by Hot Shot Sports Bar and Grill. All the games, all the time, home of STL sports fans since 1990. And they bring you this City Hub post game with myself, Matthew Rocchio, and we're joined today by Thomas Welch and Will Bratton. Tom, Will, obviously not the game you wanted to see there. By the way, fans, if you want to get involved, make this post-game show yours as much as it is ours. Jump into the comments. Obviously, I think we're going to expect a lot of reaction to a pretty negative game there. Some questions from what we saw. I know Will's itching to break down some of the negative X's and O's because that's pretty much what we saw tonight, and there's a lot to get into tonight. So right off the bat, I'll welcome him in. Thomas, how you doing tonight?
I've been better. Big Blues win earlier, but was looking forward to double up with City. Excited for the game to get started, and then right from the jump, it just felt like we were just kind of hemmed in the zone. The wind was crazy and looked like it was a factor early. So I was like, we'll get the ball at halftime, flip sides, get the wind at our backs, and it'll be completely different. But it was definitely not. It was frustrating all around. Felt like the strong point for City this year and in years past has been the midfield. And it felt like not only the midfield, but in all 3 phases of the field tonight, they got dominated. So that's frustrating. On the bright side, I know we talked about it a little before we started recording, but Ben Lund looked like he had a fantastic game. So if you're in the camp that, this Berkey went down, the season's over, which, to be fair, it's easy to see that because he's a stud and one of the bona fide best players on our team. But seeing that performance tonight from Lund, and that's got to give you, some confidence moving forward. But the rest of the game, kind of counterproductive in terms of that.
All right, let's get your thoughts right now. Will Bratton, your thoughts on a pretty negative game. I know you got a lot of thought. I know you got a lot to say after tonight. I'm going to be like a grandpa here. I'm going to give you $20. Don't spend it all at once. Let's hear your thoughts.
Well, I'll go out and use half of that $20, and I'll put 10 down right away on reiterating what Thomas just said, and that's Ben Lund is a reliable goaltender. And without Berkey, we're going to be fine. We're not going to sink. The ship's not going to collapse. Things are going to be okay. But that relies on the 10 guys in front of him putting on a performance and scoring goals, because at the end of the day, holding a red-hot Philadelphia Union, scored the most goals in MLS up until this point, I believe, to 1 goal on the road is really a good result. And those 10 guys in front of him have to be able to net at least 2. Ben Lund bailed St. Louis City out of a potential blowout, especially in the first half. 7 saves in the first half alone is something you really shouldn't have to do as a goalkeeper. So shout out Ben Lund for that. And we'll get into the tactics a little bit more. I won't use the rest of my 20 yet, but $10 goes to Ben Lund right away.
Right off the bat, Scott Parrott joins in. If you want to jump in here on the City Hub postgame presented by Hot Shot Sports Bar and Grill, please do. This is your postgame as much as it is ours. Scott Parrott, rough night all around, the broadcast included. Yeah, let's rip the Band-Aid off there.
Yeah.
Is anybody out there in the world, can anybody explain to me where in God's green earth City Slickers came from? Why the broadcaster thought it was a fun idea? Where who is there a media packet I missed? What the hell was going on with this City Slickers thing? Honestly, that was the worst part of the entire night.
It also felt like there was a quota on the usage of the word rhythm, like 74 times, I swear. I was like, yeah. And it also feels like maybe this is biased too, but it feels like consistently, for whatever reason, City just can't get announcers on their side. I don't know if it's their play style or what, but they're just this other team is doing fantastic. And City will have a breakaway chance or a big chance where it looks like they're going to score. They don't even get excited. And then a cross comes across the box for Philadelphia and they act like it was a screamer from 30 yards. I'm like, what is happening right now? It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get caught up in that part of the broadcast because I think you can complain about that pretty much all day long if you really want to. On the other side, I thought City Slickers was just really weird. Are you trying to force the nickname? Did
Yeah.
somebody tell him that? Was that a joke? Did Taylor Twellman play a joke on one of his colleagues? Was like, is Taylor Twellman with his feet kicked up? Like he said it like 8 times.
Yeah.
Got him. I bet that easily could be it. That would make me really happy. It would actually be a concrete explanation. But let's go into the actual meat of more than anything what Scott Parrott said. Rough night all around. I put out a poll on Twitter. You can engage with it on @RockSTL. And I said, where was City's biggest issue tonight? Lineup. And my little tag was where's Klaus? The attitude, because that was a lot of cards and a lot of fouls that completely, as you said, Thomas, I don't know if that was right before we started or if it was that right after we started, about how this kind of marred the game and slowed things down. And I know they use the word rhythm a lot, and I'll use it again there because there was no rhythm. And then my last point on the poll was execution, because how just poor the passing was for another game in a row. No surprise there, 68% blaming the execution from City tonight. Let's dive a little bit more. I'll let you spend, let me get $3 of that 10 you're still sitting on, Will Bratton. Talk about the poor passing and the root of some bad offense from City tonight.
Yeah, honestly, I think talking about the vibe is pretty important here, because the mentality was very frustrated for St. Louis City this evening, and there were a lot of issues that you could see arise from that in some of the needless fouls, needless giveaways. Everyone was disorganized, out of sync. The way I see it, in the words of the late Brian McKenna, who tragically passed away recently, legend in St. Louis sports media. Obviously, us at Sports Hub STL, our condolences are with his family at this time. But in the words of him, your vibe attacks your tribe, and that's kind of what we saw tonight. We see a frustrated Eduard Lowen. You don't have Berkey, your captain, to kind of right the ship here, and you just see the frustration bleed in. I mean, by the 25th minute, St. Louis City we're kind of getting really carried away with just the lack of focus, really getting frustrated and just letting that take over their game. So that would be my next $3 is, we got to keep the mentality in check.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing up Brian McKenna there. Ted Williams coming in on the chat. God bless Hall of Famer Brian McKenna, #soccer family. Worked with Brian for a couple of years, was good friends with him for a long time. He was a guy who'd been living down in St. Gabe's for a long time. That's the neighborhood I grew up in. So hung out with him a lot at school picnics, which is a big event down in that parish, if you know about it. And so he was a good friend of mine. Today was a little bit rough overall, but he'd want people to laugh and be a little less serious. So we'll keep moving on. We'll keep having a little bit fun tonight. It was not a fun game, but we'll keep having a little bit fun here in the City Hub post game here on Sports Hub STL. Nigel Stoff coming in. Not the first game we couldn't control the ball. Thomas, I know there was a lot of thoughts about City 2.0 and how they would look under a new head coach. Your thoughts on the inability to control the ball offensively?
Well, I thought it was interesting that felt like we were coming off such a high with such a brilliant performance from Klaus, and then to not see him in the lineup, I thought was interesting in the way that he's able to not only hold up play, but help distribute the ball to essentially all of our playmakers. It kind of calls into question the whole system, but also like the decision-making of Mellberg, because I know we talked about it a little bit before we went live, but it didn't feel like his adjustments at halftime and kind of afterwards. Obviously, the red card to Lowen kind of throws a wrench into things. But it's easy to see the bright side in the rainbows when you're winning games and you hadn't conceded a goal all season. And then in this game, you concede early and you lose, so you're 0 for 2 in that regard. You're going to start kind of analyzing things a little bit more critically, and I think it's fair to do that in terms of the coaching as well.
Scott Parrott again chiming in. Sorry, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, no, I just want to throw another $1 at this one because with the Joao Klaus situation, I could talk about this all night, but to keep this part really short, a lot of frustrations that we've seen from Ulver City fans are a lack of satisfaction with Klaus's finishing ability. And, that's something that Cedric Teuscher, didn't know where the goal was tonight. And Scott Parrott was just coming in the chat and talking about if the goals were 15 feet higher, we'd have won, by 2 goals. And that's true. It's kind of funny to laugh about, but, it's kind of hard to score goals if you don't put a single shot on net. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Scott Parrott was in there in the chat talking there. The lack of composure was really frustrating, keeping with the fun theme. If the goals were at 15 feet higher, we would have won by 2. Yeah, I think Brian McKenna would have a comment about if Will Chamberlain was was in the game, maybe it would have been a little bit more useful for if they were playing on basketball hoops, something along those lines. Good point there by Scott Perry. Yeah, the offense was just disconcerting, and I know they skied a lot of those shots, especially late. Where I mean, let's be honest here. If we're just breaking down the offense, we did start seeing them tagging things together in the second half a lot better, and I know a lot better is kind of relative in this game. And so, but we will say that was better in the second half. They did start tagging some things together. They tagged some attacks together in the second half there, including after Eduard Lowen got bumped. What were you seeing in the second half that we weren't seeing in the first half that maybe we could see them build on week to week here? Will, hit me with it. This one's free. This one's free. Don't worry.
A lack of fear. That's what I saw. It was a team that had nothing to lose and weren't afraid to try and advance the ball. I saw a scared team in the first half. And in the second half, things were improving a little bit. So there's a little bit of momentum for St. Louis City SC in that moment. Eduard Lowen gets sent off. Now everyone's just pissed off and they're like, all right, let's just get numbers forward and see if we can level this game. And we were able to create better opportunities. Of course, you see your two creative Brazilians come into the mix eventually, and they're able to create a little bit of space as well. But even before that happened, we saw Simon Betcher make a really nice play that resulted in what really should have been a goal for Cedric Teuscher if he knew where the goal was on that shot. So, of course, that's just kind of the way it went for St. Louis tonight. A lot of things that could have gone right didn't, and there was a lot of frustration with the officiating and all sorts of issues. So.
Yeah, I think the basis of success for any team in any sport really is overcoming adversity. So for City, this is, I mean, you could say there's levels of adversity, but this is probably the most adversity they faced all season long, with the wind, with the field conditions, with the officiating, with Berkey not in net, all those things encompassing. So for me, like you said, it looked like they were kind of starstruck and got punched in the mouth kind of off the rip. So that's frustrating to watch as a fan, but, with a new system, with a new coach, all those things like that will develop over time. To kind of overcome that adversity and hopefully, get the feet going in the right direction. So, we'll see what the future brings.
Nigel Stoff's having some fun. Can we get a petition to enlarge the goals? Nigel also came in on my Twitter with a very interesting question. He said, what are your thoughts on Hartel? I love Klaus. Even when he doesn't score, I can see what he does on the field. But I felt like Hartel was supposed to be a goal scorer, and he hasn't been. And I wasn't trying to prove him wrong, but I did just throw out a little secondary question on Twitter, which is how often in the 7 full seasons before he came to City do you think Marcel Hartel scored more than 5 league goals? The answer is twice. He scored 5 once, he scored 12 in obviously that huge season he had with St. Pauli. And I'm not saying he's not a goal scorer. I'm just saying that expecting him to be the lone goal scorer and kind of comparing him and saying, well, if we can't get it from Klaus, we can get it from Hartel. The point is that you have Teuscher and Hartel and other guys around him, Bescher coming off the bench. You have other guys around him who can fill and run off Klaus, not just Hartel, or else he'd be more of a striker, and I think it would be more of an impetus to play him higher and more centrally a lot more. And so I think it's a fair point, and we're talking a little bit about Klaus. I want to go back into it for a little bit in here. And Kira Stoff saying double standards for Hartel versus Klaus. I want to hear what you please elaborate on that one, because that's an interesting point. I don't think you're necessarily wrong, but I want to know exactly what you mean, what kind of double standard you're talking about, because I want to talk more about the Klaus factor, because there has seemed to have been a conversion over the last month or so. And man, it's just a completely different level of conversation than we were at with Klaus last year. Thomas, you were on more of the fan side last year. You were in the muck of that rough 2024 season with Klaus. What are your thoughts about seeing this change in the fan base over João Klaus to start this 2025 season? Are you surprised? Why do you think it's happened? Is it kind of soft the moment he gets out there and actually gets a 90-minute run and doesn't score? Everyone's going to turn on him. What do you think about this, Thomas?
Well, I think it is easy to look at the player up top closest to the goal and be like, that guy's supposed to score. If he doesn't score, he's failing at his job, right? And I think obviously we have a ton of soccer fans here in St. Louis and students of the game, but we also have people that are coming over that are like, oh, it's an MLS team. Like, I'd love to follow them and just kind of relate it to the Blues and relate it to the Cardinals, all those things, right? So I think there's a mix of that, but St. Louis is notable for always trying to find a scapegoat, I feel like, and I think Klaus is that easy scapegoat off the rip. But then we have games like tonight where it's like, well, it really felt like Klaus could have been useful if he started from the jump. So I think as we go on and the more we see of Klaus, as well as the less we see of Klaus, people will kind of start to understand more full circle what kind of player he is and what he brings. But also going to the comment, the double standards for Hartel versus Klaus, I think it's almost a similar conversation, because like both of them, like you could say that Hartel should be coming in and scoring with the quality of player that he is, but you can also see the quality of player that he is just in his passes. He had a nice little back heel flick tonight on an overrun. So it is obviously the goal for any soccer team is to score goals, right, and win games. But it's the things that lead to those goals that are most impactful for any team and from a player-to-player basis. And so kind of isolating those elements, I think, is where you can get the true impact of a player for a team.
Your thoughts on the? I think first of all, he's right. I mean, Kirchhoff is right. That's exactly what happens. The people get tagged to the money, and again, I have explained this a lot, and I don't know if I have to explain it again. Why judging Klaus on the money is foolish, because there literally isn't anything that City could do about his salary until the end of this season. And so complaining about it beforehand, and why isn't he a TAM, or why do they've been wasting a DP spot? They switched the roster for him, so that's not a real thing. So don't worry about the money. You're right, Stoff. People, that's where the double standard absolutely is. And I think, but I do think, to your point, Thomas, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like there's so many people in St. Louis, because they played soccer growing up, they do have a very rigid idea of the game because they played it as a youth. And so it's like defenders defend, midfielders run a lot, and attackers score. And that's the soccer they played growing up. And then they stopped and played a different sport because that's what happens in this country. And I honestly think there's a lot of people who are, because every time I run across so many St. Louis fans who are like, I've been playing the game for 50 years, strikers score. I go, well, are we really? This is the conversation we're going to have? No nuance, no development of the game over the last 40 years. That team in orange just doesn't exist. Barcelona never happened. Like, come on. Like, this is, the game learns off each other. This, if you're wondering why, if you're a nerd and you're wondering why everyone's talking about attacking boxes or 4-man boxes in the midfield, it's because everyone copies each other, and it's just, it's football. It's a copycat sport in every sense of the word, both versions across every country on this entire planet. And so I get bothered when people get this myopic, static view of soccer in a game that is purposefully not that way. And over the last 30 years has grown less and less that way, and more positionless, the same way you could argue basketball has, and a lot of those sports that are fluid in that way have. Let's go to Scott Parrott here. Are you guys concerned with the number of offsides that Cedric Toyshirt is drawing? I don't know the exact number, but it feels like over the last few games, he's been off at least twice each game. Will, you're nodding your head. I feel like you got a number, you got a feeling. Let's hear it.
When I'm thinking about Toyshirt, right, his prime, his bread and butter, where does he want to play? He wants to be a false nine. He doesn't want to be doing Joao Klaus's job necessarily. Now, did he do a pretty good job against Seattle doing it? Yes, but when you put a player like Toyshirt in that position, who's itching to be a goal scorer and sometimes less of a playmaker, he's going to find himself in bad positions and get offsides, cheating a little too far forward. He's not really used to being the first man on the back line, stretching the back line that far most of the time. Of course, he's still going to do that from time to time as a false nine, but overall, I'm not terribly concerned with the amount of offsides that he's drawing, assuming that this isn't going to be a long-term fixture where we're expecting him to replace Joao Klaus and we're going to try and build around him as a target nine, because in my honest opinion, I think that's a recipe for failure.
In fairness to Scott, who eagle eyes on the game tonight, 3 offsides for Cedric Toyshirt tonight, 1 each against the Galaxy and the Sounders. Didn't look like he tallied one against San Diego in a short time there, or against the Rapids, and I believe he was coming off the bench for 9 minutes in that one, so you can throw those ones out. When he's played a lot of minutes, he has gotten rung up for at least 1 offsides a game, and 3 tonight, so good call there by Scott Parrott. We'll keep rolling on here because our fans are doing a great job contributing here on the City Hub post game presented by Hot Shot Sports Bar and Grill. All the games all the time. A great place to spend your away games, and then you can just sit there, keep on getting refills, get another round of nachos, and watch us here on the City Hub postgame. And go ahead and join into the comments because we will be getting to them throughout this postgame. As long as we're talking. I did pick up something because I was listening to the postgame press conferences in my ear. I want to bring up one thing that Olaf Melberg had, really the one thing that jumped out to me. I don't have the full quote. I'm going to look for it here on X, but I think it might surprise you guys here. But let's get to Nigel as he joins us in again. Just a quick shout out to my uncle Jim Murphy, who passed away this week as he appeared twice for the United States men's national team with a goal and an assist, and he played for Cutis. I know there's a lot of legends who played both for Cutis and the United States men's national team across the last 100 years. So, quick shout out to your uncle Jim Murphy, man. We're losing St. Louis legends, people. We're losing legends, we're losing recipes, and that breaks my heart. So yeah, shout out to Jim Murphy. And United, man, a goal and an assist. God, I love every time I hear about some St. Louis kid who came up and scored in the United States men's national team kit. I absolutely love that. Wow. Sorry, I looked up. Nashville is absolutely just kicking Montreal's teeth in 3-0 right now. Still
early.
I still have the game rolling from earlier. Nigel says, I agree, Scott. It reminds me of our defense last year when we kept everyone on side. I believe he's referring to Toy Shirt kind of screwing things up on the other side. Defense overall tonight, your guys' thoughts. Obviously, that's been the hallmark. They didn't get the clean sheet record or the shutout record, I guess you want to call it. But overall, your thoughts on the defense. We'll start with you, Thomas.
I think a game like this really helps show how important Kessler is to this team too. Because I thought even in the midst of chaos and a game just kind of spiraling downward, he was still kind of a beacon of light on that back end. To Will's point earlier, it seemed a little bit chaotic with Josh Yarrow subbing on, kind of had a whiff on the clearance that could have led to a ball in the back of the net. So I think it feels like chaos is the perfect word to describe this game specifically, but specifically on the back end too. And it doesn't help that you're hemmed in your zone for the majority of the game. I think possession was not great in favor of City. So, and that's, take that with a grain of salt because that doesn't necessarily mean success for either team, but it's starting to be a trend. But yeah, I think the back end, it's frustrating because we had the conversation before on the post game is like, is the lack of goals being scored against City due to its defense or due to the just goaltending of Roman Berkey? And we saw great goaltending from Ben Lunt tonight. So you could have been like, oh, there's another clean sheet, right? But it wasn't. So.
Yeah, honestly, the way I see it is St. Louis City FC have now played 5 full matches of MLS play. They've conceded 1 goal and 0 goals from the run of play. It was a set piece goal. And when you're not really playing composed on the ball, you're giving a lot of fouls, a lot of bad throw-ins, just a lot of corners too, just random giveaways that are completely unnecessary most of the time. These types of teams that are really good on set pieces like Philadelphia are going to punish you from time to time. And so I'm satisfied with the defensive result. Ben Lunt, of course, did great for us to make up for the mistakes that we did see in the back line. But I wouldn't say the back line was bad or anything where it's alarming. It just wasn't their best match for sure. But thankfully, we have a great goaltending tandem in St. Louis, just like the Blues do, who beat the Blackhawks today with Joel Hofer, their backup keeper. So, great goaltending is a theme in St. Louis. That's not a huge concern of mine. And in the same breath, the back line tonight didn't really pose any major concerns for me.
Shouts to your Bulldogs. I'm sorry about that one, Will. Team. Hey, look at it right there.
I don't want to talk about that. That was a soft spot, man. Low blow.
All right. No, I meant it. I had them in my bracket, I swear. Team has gone through 3 coaches now and only looked great its first 3 months. Eddie doesn't like to play 10. He likes to play 8, but that needs to change. Whew. I thought we got rid of this conversation in 2023, but I guess we got to dive right back in. Okay. You want the best player on your team who I mean, you can go check out my Twitter. You can go check out Will's Twitter, Thomas's Twitter, Matt Baker, Chat City Tackers. Everyone in the last 6 months has a Twitter post about it with Eduard Lowen stats that tell you he's productive as all living daylight. I mean, he is undoubtedly. Has he had a bad game and an extremely uneven game like he had tonight? Yes, he hasn't been great this year. But even with those 2 bad games, every number even this year is still incredible. It's all green for the most part for Edu Lowen. And so I don't know how you want to take the idea of taking your best player or one of your best players, top 3, especially outfield, and saying, I know you like to play this way, but here's how you want to play. This is what I was talking about with the striker stuff again. Why do you think that because he's your 10, he only can play where you think 10s usually stereotypically play, which is as attacking midfielders behind strikers, above the central midfield? That's where you think 10s play. But again, this game has evolved over the last 40 years, and there are teams that have won whose primary playmaker has essentially come from every position on the field at this point. Like there are teams who run out of their wing backs. There are teams who play out of the back so much that their center backs are that important. I mean, every single position in world football has been used as a primary playmaker. So if Edu says, I want to play deeper, go get the ball, and then have the whole field to play out in front of, then that's what you're going to let him do. And I don't understand how that's still an issue. He plays like a deep-lying playmaker, and we've seen dozens of guys in the last 30 years across the world control their team and be the primary playmaker. I'm not sure why that is still getting some fans rankled. That blows my mind, honestly.
It also feels interesting because, like, I could be wrong about this, but I think Toy Shirt and Hartle both prefer the 10. So they went out and acquired these guys so that Lowen doesn't feel the need to go into that 10 role. They get these guys that want to play the 10 and prefer to play the 10. So slot them in there while Lowen stays at the 8 where they feel like he's most viable. I feel like that's kind of the relationship there. Was like, well, if we want him to move up, we'll just go get players that, will move up and will stay moved up. And it's worked out pretty well for them. Didn't work out tonight, but in other games past it has.
Yeah, Hackworth called Toy Shirt a 9.5, which I think is a perfect way to describe him. And Carnell again is more of a 10, although this year he's played a very team game. Miguel Angel, thank you for joining so much, and you're bringing up some other great comments. You did press one of my buttons. We look slow on the wings. I don't understand all these long balls. We don't have speed for it. Play to feet. And that's a great point, especially because on this roster, there is some speed on the wings. But we're not seeing a lot of Celio Pompeu, and Rasmus Alm isn't in the lineup yet. So I think Miguel Angel hit it right on the head today. I'm looking up the exact numbers, but I mean, I don't even have to look at numbers here. You watch that game, the ball was in the air on long balls that were not won way too many times. And when they were playing short, it wasn't connecting except for about a 15 to 20 minute span from about 55 to 75 or so. And so, yeah, I agree 100% with Miguel Angel on this one. You guys?
Yeah, I think a little bit of the uncharacteristically large amount of long balls had to do with the field conditions not being ideal. I think that was a slight part of it because it was obvious that both teams were having a little bit of frustration with the field conditions, trying to play smoothly. Short passes were getting choppy, and so that definitely contributed a little bit. But I still completely agree. We have guys who can play those roles, and we're not using them. So the fact that we're trying to play like they're out there, the same way I was so frustrated tonight that we were trying to play like Joao Klaus was out there for 55 minutes when he was not out there. And we don't have anybody on the roster who can do exactly what he can do as a target 9. So, it's a really similar story in that regard of, we need to play, City needs to play with the people that they have out on the pitch. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole at times.
Okay. Thomas?
Yeah, I was just going to pull up. SofaScore has Philadelphia at 65% on aerial duels to City's 35%. And the wind was a factor too. So if the field's choppy and you try to play it through the air, and the balls looked like they were dying every time that City tried to play those long balls. But like we said, I feel like there's a bald striker for City that could have also helped on those aerial duels that didn't see a lot of the field today.
Whoa.
I'm just saying.
Balding.
Bald is a little bold.
I'm going to look like him in a couple weeks here. So.
A little bit like lashing out there, Thomas. My God, just like from deep.
Does this upset you, Rock? Is this push any
Just,
buttons on you?
We're good. We're fine. We're good.
But I just thought that was interesting. The 65% out of the air is
calling Klaus bald. The balding, please. Also, great stat there. And here's the number I found here. This was from FootMob. City went with 39% on long balls. Philadelphia 57%. So right there, that's just that's showing that you're I know percentages usually aren't the best thing because again, City was technically more accurate than Philadelphia but you can throw that in the trash because this comparison is insane. City had 190 passes in their own half, or completed passes, I should say. 190 completed passes in their own half. Philadelphia had 54 completed in their own half. They completed 164 in their opposition half. City completed 87 in the opposition half. I mean, they got absolutely outplayed. And so one thing I do want to say, San Diego, terrible game, horrible, bad, in pretty much every way that we saw tonight. We see it again. Are we just seeing a team that goes up against a style that right now, whether it's the lineup, the system, or the game plan, they simply cannot beat a team that presses high? And I want to ask that question and throw in this caveat. I do not have the full quote, but Olaf Melberg was asked about the press, and he pretty much said he didn't think it was a huge impact in the game. Go ahead, Will Bratton.
Wow. Interesting from Melberg. I'm curious as to the context of what prompted him to say something that sounds so horribly untrue to me at first glance. But, I'm not, a football manager getting paid, millions of dollars to do it. So, of course, maybe he might see something different than I. But for me, I see a St. Louis City side right now who are really struggling to deal with the press. And we saw this with San Diego. But I will say there have been, glimpses that this team can play out of the back through a high press. We saw that with Colorado's kind of like half effort high press that they did for a portion of the match. And we did see it in preseason with the Red Bulls, and that was handled, decently well, I'd say. So, for me, I'm not saying it's hopeless, but what we're seeing so far is a team that has yet to effectively be able to do it in MLS play for sure. Because, in the San Diego match, while we played great defensively, City, you can't defend for 80 minutes of a match and expect to win, which is exactly what happened. You came out with a 0-0 draw that you had to fight, by the skin of your teeth to get. Whereas tonight, St. Louis City finally paid the price for, playing defense for prolonged periods of times in a match and not really generating much in the opposition's half, as Rock mentioned, with 87 passes or whatever it was in the opposition half. It's just not good enough on the ball.
Your thoughts on this team's inability to play against teams that utilize the press, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it makes sense for them to keep the formation that's been successful for them so far. But maybe
they're not changing the formation.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's interesting.
Push another button on Rock.
Yeah, there's a dollar in the jar right there. But yeah, I don't know. It seemed like the press did have an impact on the result of the game. There's a whole lot of things that could have had impacts as well. Like we talked about the wind, the field, and guys' rest and the officiating as well. But it did feel like the press had an impact on the game from my perspective. So if Olaf says it didn't have an impact, then I believe him, and hopefully, they'll kind of keep things behind closed doors and, figure it out in practice and go from there. But it does look like this team is struggling against Red Bull style soccer.
Tom Timmerman also tweeting out that Olaf Melberg said that Lowen was coming off at that next sub that happened just before his yellow card. And so just a few more seconds and City has a chance with a full roster, and they also have arguably their best player for next week's matchup. But both of those things now fall to the wayside. They go to a man down. They can't tie that up despite a couple really good chances after that 66-minute red card. And now they will be without Eduard Lowen next week as they try to go for a win, getting back into the W column. And, ooh, yeah, it hurts, Thomas. I agree with you on that one. Nigel coming in. We just couldn't connect any passes this game, which feels like it's starting to become a trend. Also, I saw another person who was Scott came back in and said the long balls were head scratcher. Thomas is right. The balding Brazilian baller wasn't out there to win some of those aerials. Balding, yes, correct, Scott Parrott on that one. And I wanted to connect those two because I get the idea about the not connecting passes. I get the long ball because I want to complain about the long ball too, but wasn't really much going on with the short game either.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
there's a point where you got to dump it forward when, you have a high press coming at you and you're struggling to build out of the back and you don't have an option. You got to send it long or force, deal with a lot of turnovers in the midfield, which you can't deal with against a team like Philadelphia.
Yeah,
a lot of it. I mean, like you said, on the ground and in the air, it just felt like hopeful passing from St. Louis, and 9 times out of 10 against an MLS team, that's going to bite you for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you guys both on that one. We'll keep rolling on here with our comments here. Ruby coming into the comment here on the City Hub postgame here on Sports Hub STL. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe, and make sure you hit the little bell there so we go. When we go live here on all the City Hub post games, because we don't always go on right after the game. Sometimes at the home games, we like to go to the presser, get you a couple answers on some of the questions we know we're going to be asking so we can get you a little more insight. And sometimes we come on right after the game when it's these earlier games, these away games. We know you guys are sitting on Twitter, you're sitting at home, you're either really happy or you're like tonight, where you're obviously not so happy. And so we like to jump on. So thank you so much, Ruby, for joining us here on the comment as well. I thought Ben's performance was really positive, especially with Berkey's contract being up this year. You're the resident Ben Lunt expert, Will Bratton. And so talk a little bit more about what you saw from Ben Lunt tonight and from last week.
Yeah, I saw a goalkeeper who's confident in the net, and I want to throw a quick tidbit out there, and let's not forget that Ben Lunt's contract also expires at the end of this year with no club option, so he would have to sign an entirely new contract under new terms and conditions at a new salary. He'd have to sign off on. It could be the same salary, but he'd have to sign a new contract to stay with St. Louis City SC. There's not much doubt in my mind that MLS teams around the league wouldn't look towards trying to pick up a goalkeeper like Ben Lunt as their number one goalkeeper. You can name a team like, for example, San Diego, who don't have the best goaltending situation at the moment, that could definitely throw Ben Lunt in there as a starter. So those are definitely things to think about as the year goes on. When Berkey comes back, if you get to a point where Berkey's going to sign a new contract and you've got that kind of understood, do you maybe try to get Ben Lunt sold this year to a club maybe within MLS to get a good return for him before that contract expires? Once your former designated player, Swiss netminder, comes back, those are definitely things to think about. But regarding Ben Lunt's play, I saw a goalkeeper confident in the net. He was very strong with his communication. You could see that even on Apple TV. You didn't have to be there in person to see how much he was communicating. And not only that, but the back line was listening to him, and they have a lot of trust in him. And Kessler and him have that little bromance going on where they're just kind of running everything defensively. And it was very effective. So obviously he did great as being a shot stopper tonight. Got involved in the air too, won a couple of aerial duels. I'd like to see him be a little more aggressive within his own 6-yard box on maybe corners, trying to mitigate some of these opportunities that Philly easily could have capitalized on, that I thought were when you have a 6'7" goaltender, that he could have run out there and grabbed those. So that's maybe the only, but that's getting nitpicky. So overall, I'm pretty happy with Ben Lunt.
Ted Williams joining the chat today. Did we miss Totland tonight on the attack? I think it's an interesting question. Akil Watts didn't have a great game. There's no doubt about that at all. Yeah. His dribbles were bad. His first touch, he gave up the ball too much. He didn't really connect on anything long at all. Had 3 passes into the final third, dispossessed twice. His defense was okay. Won a fair amount of duels. Wasn't great in the air. So he wasn't as bad as the 6.1 on some of these sites are going to tell you, but he wasn't as solid as he was in kind of the jack of all trades role in the midfield and coming off the bench, maybe at the wingback spots that we thought. But also overall, when you look at his positioning, the ground he covered over there on the right wing, and you look at what Totland's done this season, who other than that big game against LA where he had 0.75 of the XG because he was whipping in that beautiful cross. I don't know if Totland has been the boost in the attack that we all expected him to be, especially with him playing even higher. Again, Watts didn't have a good game, but I don't think that's where we felt the absence tonight in the attack. Thomas, your thoughts on that right wing back spot?
Well, I would say, I feel like one of Totland's biggest traits is ripping in those crosses, like we mentioned. And SofaScore has City on 0 for 9 on crosses on the game. So even if he is whipping those crosses in, somebody's got to be on the end of them. And they just weren't this game. So if if he's, providing that impact to the game, he's got to be finding somebody. And I agree with you, Rock, that although I love Totland, I think he's fantastic. I think he's well-rounded defensively and provides that spark offensively. I don't think there's a massive drop-off from him in the game that we saw from Watt. So I'm not sure you end up with a different result just by simply slotting in Totland.
Yeah, one thing I'll mention. Oh, I apologize.
No, go ahead, Will. Jump in.
One thing I will mention, and I'll just mention it real briefly here on the Totland topic, is that when you do have Tomas Totland, who's a little more defensively reliable for me than Akil Watts, that takes a little bit of the pressure off of Conrad Vollum, who's supposed to be getting more forward. He's supposed to be someone who's pretty quick on the ball and can be a playmaker. And he's talked about in his post-match presser after Seattle about having to play a little more defensive than he would like, not really getting as involved in the attack. So an indirect effect towards the attack of Totland could definitely be Wallum, not being able to get quite as involved in that attack.
You know what? I'm really glad you said that. And looking at Wallum's touch map for today, he was all around the park, which is you expect from him. That hasn't been the part that's held him back. But to your point, his two biggest hotspots are both in City's half. So not getting up there and playing offensive, which is pretty much what it was against Seattle, and a lot more stark in the defensive areas than it was in any of the three games. Obviously, he came off the bench in that first game against Colorado. But yeah, so he's been a lot more defensive in these last two games. And that actually brought me to one I wanted to bring up, because we're talking about another huge game from Ben Lund. We've talked about Berkey having to save them already. We're talking about the defense being great and the offense having problems. And you just brought up the balance factor. Are we looking at a team who, one, are we overrating the defense a little bit? And are we looking at a team who is robbing Peter to pay Paul by playing a more defensive set that is robbing them of their offensive punch? And therefore, they're covering up some of the defensive issues. They're battening down the hatches. And yet still, we've had games where the goalies have had to have huge moments to still save you. Are we dealing with an improved defense, but potentially a combination of two things? One, and these are the two things I want you guys to comment on. And we'll go Thomas and then Will here, because I can only work left to right. We'll get two things that I'm wondering. One, are we dealing with a little fool's gold in just the one goal allowed so far? And two, are we looking at a defense and a system that, as I'm saying, I'll steal the phrase again, robbing Peter to play Paul? Are we looking at a team that is battening down the hatches so much defensively that they are robbing themselves of offensive punch? Those are my two questions. I need answers from both of you guys on this one. Thomas, go ahead. 1 and 2, break it down.
Rock, have you ever seen Black Mirror?
I have, yes. It's very disconcerting.
That's how I feel right now.
Okay,
I feel like my whole mind is just completely blown, but I feel like it's definitely possible. And given, we've only played 5 games in the MLS so far, so it's really hard to gauge off of that sample size, defensively, offensively, but also the quality of our opponents, So I think it's definitely possible in the way that, man, you slot in Ben Lund, like you said, and he's just lights out as much as you could ask for a goalie, really making saves left and right, and a 1-0 result. Really, with the way that this team is structured and the offensive names that they have on that side of the ball, should in reality win you most games, but they're just not getting it offensively. So I think, I got to sip on that one for a while, because I feel like you just completely blew my mind. I'll pass it over to Will.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and touch here as Rock goes through a costume change. But for me, he's got the
Ted's questioning me. I have both of them. How dare you, sir? I have both of them. And you know what? Hold on a second. You know what? You want to question me? You know what? We'll play. I'll play this game. How about second division Brazilian side?
Wow.
Yeah. What now? Get at me. Sorry about that, Will. Go ahead.
That's a 2 a.m. Marshall's find right there. That's what that is. You got to love those. For me, to answer Rock's big 1-2 punch, I honestly, I don't really think it's a lot of fool's gold. I think St. Louis City SC have been playing good defense. And at the end of the day, in an MLS club an MLS league that is very attack heavy, they don't really spend, clubs aren't bringing in designated player defenders most of the time. Roman Berkey, being a goalkeeper, is one of the few defensive players that's a designated player in the league, you're going to have a lot of open play. There's going to be a lot of shots on goal in a lot of these matches. And so you have to expect your goalkeepers to occasionally have a job to do, the job they're paid to do. And you have to hope that they're going to come up in those moments. And we've had 2 matches so far, plus 1 moment, that Roman Berkey had in our second match. But overall, we've had, 2 matches where the goalkeepers have had to stand on their heads, one of those being tonight. And both times they've delivered. And I would like to think that the defense has put Ben Lunt and Roman Berkey in positions to make good saves, getting bodies in shooting lanes, forcing bad angles. And, I think a lot of the goalkeeper's success can be accredited towards the work of the back line of forcing those low, XG chances. So for me, I don't see it as a lot of fool's gold. I think Melberg City 2.0, as coined by Lips Fan and Steel, is much better defensively. And the most important thing now is, can we find ways to build out of the back? In St. Louis City, get balls into the back of the net and really into the opposition's half for anywhere except Dignity Health Sports Park in LA, because it's been a struggle for the other 4 matches so far.
Absolutely. And while I think those things might be minutely true, I agree with you both. And that was more of a negative idea. And one of the reasons why I think the second one isn't as true is because of those 20 minutes in the second half gave me a lot of hope, because this team is shooting itself in the foot offensively. This is not a system problem. This is not, I know people like blaming coaches. We're in the middle of March Madness. People love blaming coaches when the offense stalls out in basketball. This is not the coach, in my opinion, or the system. This is just guys who are just blowing every offense. I mean, you could break it down. Just take every time they got the ball on the offensive side of the half and tag 2 or 3 passes together. Inevitably, a player mistouched the pass, slipped on the ground, or something goofy happened, and they lost all momentum in the play every single time.
You're
and that's
absolutely right.
That's execution on the field. That's the time you can actually look at the tape and say, this isn't a coach being bad. This isn't a coach not having a good scheme. This is players failing to execute anything and everything that was supposed to be the scheme. And that's what I think we saw tonight, was a team, and that's what I think we've seen a lot of these games offensively, is a team that is completely failing to execute offensively. Like, it's not that there's only 3 guys in the attack because they're parking the bus. No, there's 5 guys in the attack. The problem is 2 of them are tripping over their own damn feet, and the other one's has the touch of a gargoyle, and so all of a sudden now the attack's dead. And so that's the problem with the offense right now, and that's should be solvable when you have the talent you have on this team.
We are going City Hub after dark here.
Yes, we are.
Rock, I have a question for you, actually. So
Yes,
we've
sir.
talked about how each position is now malleable in the ways that they play, right? So if in your assessment, if we're breaking it down from the forwards to the midfield to the defense and all their aspects of defending or all their aspects of offense, where do you think this team is struggling the most right now, taking the goalie out of it, because they've both been kind of standouts in my opinion?
That's a good question.
I think right now they're not getting nearly enough play from the width, and I think the wingbacks aren't necessarily having bad games, but I think it's connection of, I think the wingbacks aren't doing enough. They're not connecting with the forwards, and I think one thing we haven't talked about is that this was the second iteration of the Toy Shirt Besher forward pairing. The other one being the San Diego game where they faced a pressing squad and looked like complete crap. I'm not saying those are the two. I'm not saying those are contributing factors. I'm saying they both happened, and maybe causation isn't there. Whatever.
I was about to say correlation, not causation.
Maybe
but
not.
For me,
maybe.
I smell it though. I smell the causation.
And so to your point, I think that is really where the issue is that to make this 5-back system work, you have to have those channel runs where the wingback hits your guy on the run from the wide part to the channel, and then if you have another guy in the middle, you go channel to the middle, and then things get nasty. The problem right now is that they're screwing up the pass from the channel to the middle or the resulting passes after that, and they're also not really getting that channel attack going right now. That's what I think is missing in this offense so much. Me and Will talked about that last week. It's just you talk about having you have your two wings, your two channels in your middle, and they're not attacking all points of a defense right now. They're not putting pressure. And the fact is, and part of that again is the fact that they're not getting good touches. They're not stringing passes together. But to your point, that's where I think you mentioned it earlier, Will, at times Conrad Wallem hasn't been able to be the offensive player we want to see from him. We haven't seen the crossing game in the long ball game from those players. We haven't seen the runs build up. And part of that was the lack of Klaus, because you guys mentioned earlier, they're not winning headers. They're not winning the aerial duels, which means those crosses and those long balls from the wings are essentially useless. And the other part has to be that although Hartel and although Hartle and Lowen are having good games, they are not elevating the team beyond a level. And that's what great players do. It's what Eduard Lowen did the first year and a half before Hartle got here. It's what Hartle did a lot more often once he arrived here, and it's unfortunately what neither of them has done this year. They're putting up great numbers. They have solid numbers. They're great players. They will always put up good numbers, but the expectations and the relativism of it has to be different for them, which is the bar is higher. The ceiling, the floor has to be lower. The ceiling is higher. And so those guys have not stepped up either. And I think that's where the entirety of the issue is. And so that's my answer. And I'm going to turn this one around on you guys, because you brought me to one of my final points here as we're closing in on an hour, breaking down a 1-0 loss. The toy shirt Bescher pairing up top. We saw it again against a pressing team just like San Diego. It did not work. Although the reasons I thought it didn't work against San Diego is that I thought City was never able to counter press. And I think that weakened Simon Bescher's game, and it's not Cedric Toyshirt's game. Since that, or we didn't really see them fail to counter press Philly. I just saw them not be able to really tag things together. And I thought they were better than they were against San Diego. They were actually effective. They were involved in the attack. Your guys' thoughts on Toyshirt Bescher 2.0. Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that I think Bescher this season, like obviously he's kind of riding a hot hand and finding the back of the net a lot. So to the knee-jerk reaction of fans in the Klaus camp that are kind of saying, hey, this guy should be scoring. Like, I'm sure they love seeing Bescher come in. I love seeing Bescher come in too. He's a slew boy, he provides the energy. But I think his role is maximized as a super sub off the bench, and providing that spark when he's got legs going up against people that are already tired. I think he can maximize that impact that he has on the game. I also think that Klaus is more effective at pressing the other team. So I think all those things considered might be why the pairing tonight wasn't successful as we would have hoped it would be.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. And one of the big things with Klaus that he brings is the ability to hold up the play. Whereas Bescher is really good at getting in behind. But when you're playing against a 4-back like Philadelphia was running, and St. Louis City are struggling to really create in the middle of the pitch, so you're just sending these balls forward, Bescher's not really going to be able to get in behind in behind that back line. So you need somebody like Klaus who can bring the ball down back to the goal and distribute underneath to a Lowen, a Hartle, a Watts, a Wallem, anybody, even a toy shirt left to right, whatever it may be. You need that type of calmness. And then also you make a great point about Joao Klaus really runs our press for St. Louis City SC when he's on the pitch. And that's a big part of wearing down a back line and creating opportunities for a guy like Simon Bescher to come into the game late and score goals, right? So we're missing steps with St. Louis City SC right now, in my opinion. I think starting Bescher Toyshirt, Olaf Melberg would probably disagree with me because it's, this was a decision he made, but I think that was a mistake. I think he should have started most of the time Klaus Toyshirt. However, for this specific opponent, given their back line and, missing 2 of their backline starters, missing their starting goalkeeper, all that adversity for Philadelphia, I actually would have loved to see Klaus and Bescher start tonight. and just terrorize that back line. Just be all over them, high press. Because what are they going to do when you've got, a Brazilian balding baller, whatever that we called him earlier, running down your throat, and you can't win an aerial duel against that guy. Klaus is going to win, 70% of his aerial duels and create opportunities for great playmakers underneath like Lowen and Hartle to distribute wide, get those services in. So, that's where I would have loved to see it. So that's where I'm at on the striker situation.
That's completely fair. City sent out the post-game presser. I do not have the answer about the facing the press of Philadelphia here in front of me, but I do have Olaf Melberg and what the team needs to do to create more scoring chances. So, quote from
good.
Olaf Melberg in the post-game. You got about $6 left, Will. We need more quality on the ball and to combine better. We had our chances today. We had a few incredible chances, even though they were not always shots on target. We had a few really good chances. That changed fast. Similar to when I was watching Nashville last week, beating this team, Philadelphia, they press a lot and make it difficult for you. But on the occasions we managed to play good at pressure, we created really big chances, which we did. And even with one man down, I think they had 2 really good opportunities to score. We had enough chances to score a goal, I think, but they had quite a lot of chances as well, especially in the first half. 2 things jumped out there. One, it went from incredible chances to really good chances in 2 sentences. And the part where he said, Philadelphia, they press a lot and make it difficult for you, but on the occasions, we managed to play good at pressure. We created really big chances, which we did, and even with a man down. I mean, they created more chances with a man down than they did before they lost Eduard Lowen, and I would disagree with him that they managed to play good at pressure. I would disagree with that sentence. That's all.
I would 100%
he knows more than me. He knows the team better. He's smarter. I disagree.
No, I mean, I agree. And I may never have the ball knowledge of, Aston Villa legend, the Swede, Olaf Melberg, with the beautiful facial hair. But I will say, for me, the eye test, the stats, nothing matches up with St. Louis playing well under pressure. And we saw this now that it's not been a fluke. We've seen it with San Diego and we've seen it with Philadelphia.
They had 19 interceptions for
it's unacceptable.
For Philadelphia. That's ridiculous. I gotta find out how many times that Bradley Carnell City squad pulled away 19 interceptions in a game. That's nuts.
Yeah. And that 19 interceptions, a lot of times these stat keepers, they're a little hesitant to give interceptions.
Yeah, that's
the last
you're
like
right.
2 or 3 years of soccer. So that number is probably even higher because a lot of 50-50 balls, they don't count those as interceptions, even if it results in a turnover. So for me, it's not good enough. The quality on the ball hasn't been good enough. We haven't worked with the ball good enough. St. Louis City has to be able to build out of the back with pressure, or they need to put their Brazilian balding baller up top and let him be the outlet to get balls out of our defensive third and create scoring chances. I mean, it's a simple solution for me.
I know I'm jumping across stat sites here, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's easier. FBref had the Bradley Carnell 2023 St. Louis City squad with one game with more than 19 interceptions. The 5-1 win over Cincinnati, they tallied 20 interceptions in that game. They did have 2 games with 17, one with 16 and a couple with 14. All of them wins or draws, by the way, for City. In the following season last year, if you guys are just wondering as I go to some match logs for 2024, City tallied 19 interceptions, a grand total of 0 times last year. They tallied 17 twice, 15 3 times. So again, 19 interceptions for the defense of Philadelphia. Bradley Carnell getting things going there in Philly, no doubt. That's rough.
It's good to see him. It's good to see Indiana Vassilev. It's tough to walk out of there with the 0-1 loss, especially in those conditions for St. Louis City SC.
Yeah, let's get some final thoughts here. Thomas, your final thoughts here as St. Louis City SC looks forward to facing Austin without Eduard Lowen coming up on March 30th.
Well, it felt like City was struggling last year at home. Felt like they struggled over the course of the season a lot, but specifically at home. So not having Eduard Lowen coming back to Energizer against an Austin team is going to be rough, especially if you're in the stands like me in the supporter section. So that's going to suck. But at the end of the day, it's well, just like any sport, and like with the Blues right now, it's next man up mentality, right? And that's going to provide minutes for somebody else to come into the fold and show Olaf what they're capable of doing. And, maybe that provides opportunity for them down the stretch of the season and changes the course of this City team as we know it. So it's just, next guy up mentality and take it game by game. Let's flush this one, leave it in the past, and go take care of business at home. See what happens.
All right, some final thoughts here before we close things out on the City Hub post game presented by Hot Shot Sports Bar and Grill. All the games, all the time, a proud partner of your St. Louis City SC, not the City Slickers. It's not their name. Never call them that again, or I will come over the table at you. I had some interesting comments on Twitter throughout the match. K. Lawrence 3232 on Twitter. I respect Olaf for fixing the gaping defensive problems, but he clearly seems to have no interest in scoring, no ambition, no aggression, no going for it. We know we have the pieces. They scored plenty the second half of last year. Where's the forward aggression? I think that gets to what you've been saying throughout this show tonight, Will, and I feel like that's what a lot of City fans are thinking. Man U survivor and STL City fanatic. One of the worst games of soccer I've ever watched. There was zero flow to the game and made worse by a foul every 3 minutes, unnecessary cards, and a lack of quality on the ball. I hope we don't have to watch another game like that this year. Fortunately, it did feel a lot like that game against San Diego. Execution in all phases, planning, coaching on the field, complete flop. That was from the South End Supporters podcast. So, yeah, a lot of negativity from the fan base, and I can't really blame them. Not a lot to take out of this one, and I agree with you guys. Maybe not fool's gold, but I am starting to wonder if there's some cracks forming overall. Final thoughts here, Will. Any worry here with City sitting at a very, very positive 2-2-1 with 8 points through 5 games?
Next weekend we play another Sunday match, and St. Louis City SC fans around the region may know that they're pretty elite at Sunday matches. Even last year St. Louis City SC took down who would become the MLS Cup champions, LA Galaxy, on a Sunday match. St. Louis City have already won their only Sunday match this year, and now they get to go home, Energizer Park, in front of the North End, all the fans, 22,423 people at Energizer Park, and defend that home environment and try and get back in the win column. I'm not terribly concerned at this point, especially with goaltending or the back line. My questions lie in what are we going to do with the striker situation? What's going to happen with Joao Klaus? And also with Eduard Lowen being out, does this present an opportunity for things to get moved around? And I'm not talking Ostrak coming in and replacing Lowen, but I'm talking about changing the orientation of the midfield a little bit to incorporate a player who is really effective in advancing the ball forward, like Tomas Ostrak. So, Alfredo Morales would be the more one-for-one option that you could see slide in for Eduard Lowen if we were just going to keep things about the same as we saw tonight. But if we do keep things about the same as what fans saw tonight, I, for one, will be unhappy, and I would like to think that the majority of the fan base will riot. So it'll be interesting to see what St. Louis City and Olaf Melberg do for this Austin matchup 8 days from now at, I believe, 1:15 p.m. Next Sunday.
You started the questions early because I'm with you on that one. You could probably flip a coin right now between Ostrak and Morales as who's going to get the start with Eduard Lowen out. Drew Young hit me up on Twitter. He said he liked the connection between Klaus and Morales late in the game. Some long lob through balls that were actually on target. So maybe we'll see a little bit more of Alfredo Morales in St. Louis City. It is a Sunday afternoon game, like Will said. So if you like listening to us here on the City Hub post game here on Sports Hub STL, presented by Hot Shot Sports Bar and Grill, make sure that when the game ends around 1:15, 3:15, so make sure around like 3:30, 3:45, when we're finishing up talking to Olaf about hopefully a St. Louis City win over Austin, you're right here on Sports Hub STL. It's an earlier game, and it's on Sunday, so we're not going to be talking to you for another 8 days, and we're going to do it earlier in the day. So around 3:30, 3:45, 4 o'clock, we'll be talking to you again on City Hub postgame, as we will every game this season. City Hub postgame will be coming to you on Sports Hub STL with a postgame show just like we did today. Another hour of fantastic broadcasting today. Thomas Welch and Will Bratton, thank you so much from both of you today. You guys have a great night. Thank you so much, St. Louis. Hopefully we'll have a better one to talk about next time here on the City Hub postgame presented by Hot Shots Sports Bar and Grill.